Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world. Thanks for joining today's presentation of the right way to select digital asset management technology. It's an exciting product for us, exciting topic, one of our flagship research areas. So really excited to have my colleague, our managing director and lead DAM analyst, Jared Jingers, on the line with us today. He's going to take us through the majority of today's presentation. My name is Scott Dill. I'm on the business development team here with the Real Story Group, and just wanted to kick things off with a couple of housekeeping items of note and then give you a little bit of background about Real Story Group, as I see a number of new folks joining us for today's session. So first, thanks for taking some time out of your day. Certainly appreciate it. I know everyone's very busy right now, so anytime you can share with us is, we really do appreciate that. We will have the opportunity for you to get the slides from today's session. So keep an eye out from those from our marketing team over the next few days, and a recording of the session will be made available on our site as well. We may have a couple minutes for questions at the end. So if you do have questions, ask those in the questions tab in the GoToWebinar control panel. If we don't get to those, we'll be sure to respond to those via email over the next 24 hours. So just a little bit about Real Story Group, how we typically engage with our customers. We've been at this now for 20 years, and there's really a spectrum of ways in which you can engage with us. On one side, there's, if you're looking at just say, evaluating in one particular technology area. In this particular case, looking at digital asset management, looking to either get a DAM system for the first time or replace your incumbent provider. Subscribe to our research, get some advisory time with Jared, and you go about your selection process. The second level is when you're taking a step back and looking more holistically at your entire MarTech stack. You have the option of subscribing to all of our research and getting a larger bucket of advisory time with our analysts. So not only would you be working with Jared, but our founder, Tony Byrne, and the rest of our analyst team to provide you with guidance on your full MarTech stack, so customer data platforms, web content management, personalization, e-commerce, et cetera. We also have a council of MarTech stack leaders that meets 4 to 5 times per year virtually for now, and it's an opportunity to learn from your peers from not only your industry but across all industries. We're fortunate to have a number of large Fortune 500 organizations that participate in that council. Our next session is on September 23rd about personalization strategy and technology. So if that's ever something that you want to discuss with us, let us know. And finally, it's not listed here, but we do offer consulting to a select number of customers throughout the year as well. So if you're looking at getting more hands-on support from us when going through a selection project or assessing your current technology stack, that's something that we can do with you as well. So any interest in any of those areas, just let us know and reach out to us. What's different about Real Story Group versus traditional analyst firms is the fact that we never work for or advise the vendors we cover in any way. What that means to you as a technology user and buyer is you're going to get a pull no punches approach when we detail what the vendors do well, but sometimes more importantly, what they don't do so well, where they could fall short for you. So, we don't really care which vendor you select. We just want you to pick the one that's going to be the right fit to meet your particular needs. We focus on digital marketing and to a lesser extent, digital workplace technology. And Jared, along with our founder, Tony Byrne, co-wrote a book a couple of years ago about the right way to select technology. And I'll hand things over to Jared to talk with you about that in a little more detail. Jared?
Great. Thank you, Scott. And thank you all for spending a few minutes. I really do appreciate that. And also thank you to our subscribers who are on the line today. It's your support that allows us to do what we do, and what we think is a really important role in this industry is being that independent voice for technology decision makers out there. So as Scott mentioned, a few years ago, we wrote a book called The Right Way to Select Technology. And the reason we did that is because in working with many of our clients, we kept hearing stories about technology projects failing. And if any of you have been around this the technology space for any length of time, I'm sure you've seen some technology projects fail in your organizations. And there are various statistics out there about how many technology projects actually fail, but if you kind of average them all out, it seems about half actually are deemed failures. And there's a whole slew of reasons why that can happen. There's so much that can go wrong in implementations. There's so much that can go wrong in rollout and change management and in adoption of new technology. But nothing pains me more than seeing a technology doomed to fail because the wrong product was selected. And so that was the reason that Tony and I decided to, hey, let's look at all of the most successful projects that we've seen and try to take some of those lessons and put that into a book called The Right Way to Select Technology. So before we talk about this correct way, let's dig into a little bit more of the reason of why people end up choosing the wrong technology in many cases that ultimately doom them to a technology implementation failure. One of those reasons is certainly because this is a bit of a blessing and a curse. You, as a technology buyer today in the MarTech world and digital asset management world, there's a ton of options for you to choose from. This is our somewhat infamous vendor map that we use to kind of plot the different vendors that we're watching on an everyday basis. Each of these lines of the subway, if you will, represent a different marketplace that we cover. And the purple line on here, the dark purple line is meant to represent the digital asset management marketplace. And you can see there's a lot of quite a few players that we're watching on an everyday basis, including some of the big hubs, if you will, some of the biggest names in software. And again, it's a bit of a blessing and a curse because on one hand, having choice when you're on the buyer side of the table is definitely a good thing. But having too much choice can be overwhelming sometimes and lead to some bad decisions. Not to mention that different vendors on this map here are trying to be your damn vendor, and some are really built to serve some digital asset management needs, and some just aren't, and it's a bit of a stretch. And so that what happens is there can be a lot of murky messages that are put out into the world and can be very confusing to a buyer. Some other reasons that we see kind of these projects go off the rails a bit is, we see a lot of buyers have this notion of this blind love because what you're experiencing in your everyday environments right now might not be optimal, and let's say maybe they're in some cases quite less than optimal. And so when you see a potential solution that is out there from a vendor, it's easy to fall in love and say, oh my gosh, it's so much better than what we have. Let's just go with that. It's got to be better than what we have. Another kind of traditional way that we see people get into trouble is this notion of happiness is a warm set of binders. And that's that situation where everyone recognizes that you need new technology, but what you do is you just put together this laundry list of requirements. You try to document every single detailed requirement as it relates to digital asset management. You put that in an RFP, you send it to a bunch of vendors, and what do you get back? You get back a bunch of yeses in a set of binders that looks like this. What we found is there's a time and place for detailed requirements, but we think when it comes to putting together the right kind of requirements to pick the right product, that's different than putting together the requirements to designing that future system. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second here, but don't lead with that laundry list of requirements. The next way is, the impact of what happens on the golf course. And I'm picking on golf course meetings, but we see this notion of management within many organizations having different relationships with software vendors, whether it's relationships they had at previous jobs or whether they were taken out to dinner at a conference, or they've just built relationships with a particular salesperson or a company over the years. And management can kind of dictate a direction of a selection just because of previous biases. And unfortunately, we see that derailing many a technology selection in today's day and age. The next kind of traditional way that I like to point out is this notion of the family car. I know when I got my license, I had these illusions that I would get a new car immediately and some some fast race car, preferably red. And what ultimately happened when I brought this up with my family is my parents said, well, we already have a minivan, and that's the car that you're going to get. And I think this is a little bit like when some of you have recognized that you needed a new digital asset management solution, and you go to your IT department and they say, well, we already have SharePoint, or we already have Dropbox or Box or something like that. And I think some real mismatches end up happening in those cases as well. And then finally, we like to think of, we see this problem that is akin to going to a horse race. If any of you have ever been to a horse race or put some hard-earned money on the ponies, what usually happens when you walk into a track is you get this form, this racing form that has a little bit of information about the horses that are running. And based on that little bit of information, you place your hard-earned money, right? And I think this is a little bit like just doing some cursory research, and looking at, different quadrants that are put out there or graphics that are put out there that try to say that these are the best vendors in the space, and maybe that should be our short list. And I'm telling you, you're doing yourselves a massive disservice if you're only looking at a single snapshot view of a marketplace. You really have to do your homework to get to the right short list to make sure that you pick the right product. So with those traditional methods out of the way, let's now get into what we think is a really different way, maybe a non-traditional way of selecting technology, but one, quite frankly, that works. We've seen it work time and time again. And I'm not saying it's a perfect way to do it, but I'm saying it's better than the traditional way, and we've seen it work over and over again with a variety of different clients for almost any type of software, but particularly DAM software, where it's very visual content-based software that really impacts an organization and the way that you work and the way that you deliver experiences at a variety of different channels. It's really we found that this methodology really works well for sussing out which vendors are going to be a truly good fit for your organization and what you're trying to do and where you're trying to get. So the way we constructed this new methodology, we didn't just pull it out of thin air. Like I said, we pulled the best of what we'd seen from the best technology selections that we've seen in the last 20 years, and we took that and began to say some of the best approaches really aligned with this notion of design thinking. And I'm sure many of you have heard of design thinking, but fundamentally it's a process and way of thinking about tough to solve problems. And if you do some more digging into the design thinking methodologies that came out of Stanford many years ago, it was really broken down into this empathy phase, definition phase, ideation phase, prototyping phase, and testing, right? It's this notion of putting something through its paces, using the tools from a designer, and really putting a human face to problems, so that you're able to come up with the best possible solution to a human-centric problem. And so we took the design thinking methodology, we took the learnings of what we'd seen work well in different client projects, and came up with this methodology that we call the right way to select technology. So again, we're taking the empathy aspect, where we're creating stories, we're defining what we're looking to do by coming up with the right RFP and the right shortlist. We're ideating, we're going through proposals and demos, and then we're doing some real hands-on prototyping and testing to find out who is the best fit for what it is you're trying to do. So let's go into each of these phases just briefly here. Let's start with the empathy phase. So here, I think it's really important to, like I said earlier, get away from trying to design the future system in a perfect way at stage one. Here, what I want you to do is go within your organization and find out what are you don't need to come up with every requirement, but you do need to find out what are the differentiating requirements for what it is you're trying to do. What makes you different? And once you do that, I want you to start to describe a future way of working that accentuates these differentiating requirements. And the way I want you to describe this is create narrative scenarios that really encompass the entire experience. I want you, and I always say there's a bit of art and science to this, because you want to describe a future way of working without prescribing a solution, because you want to leave it open-ended for a vendor to be able to say, okay, I get what they're trying to do. So again, don't start with the spreadsheets of real detailed requirements. There's time for that later. You don't need to get there right now. Instead, create use case scenarios that really paint that picture of that future way of working. And the key here is to make them as real as possible. So use real actors or personas. Use real environments. You know, what kind of interfaces are people interacting with this new system on? Is it, you know, on a Mac, on a device, on a tablet, or a phone, or a, you know, who knows what the medium is? And then start to describe your content types and your processes, and the way people, the way you think people, you're going to want people to work in that future, and describe it in a way that tells that story and communicates to the vendors who are going to receive this as part of the RFP what it is you're trying to do. And getting back to that empathy phase, and you know, I think this really goes a long way into getting input from people across the organization in a way that people can see this impacting their lives, right? When you try to figure out how this is going to impact my life in a spreadsheet, it's very difficult, because you're just probably only concerned with 10 lines of that master spreadsheet of maybe hundreds of different requirements. Here, you might be able to see how this new world would affect you. And we found that going through this process really gets buy-in from stakeholders, and people really start to understand, I get what we're buying here, I get where we're going, and you get everyone marching in the same direction, and that goes a long way to user adoption at the end of the day. Once you have those use case scenarios, those stories created, next we want to get to that definition phase, and this is really all about getting that right shortlist. Right, it's really easy to make mistakes in putting the wrong vendors on a short list in today's day and age, because there's so many options, like we talked about. And so it's really easy to go look for that one size fits all snapshot and of a particular marketplace, and then what happens? You just look in the upper right hand corner and make that your short list. We see this happen time and time again, when some of the most successful projects that I've seen were solved by vendors who were not in the upper right hand quadrant of different snapshots of marketplaces. In fact, the best solution was within a very different quadrant, and it turned out that was very much the right partner for them. And as I mentioned earlier, when I showed you the Subway Mac, there's a ton of different options, but even just in the DAM marketplace, there's lots of different options, and a pretty wide range of complexity in this marketplace, even more so than some of the other marketplaces that we cover. You know, on one hand, you have some really expensive, really complicated platforms that can be customized to your heart's content. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have some really purpose-built products that are really good at certain things, but not so good at other things. And trying to get them to do those other things is really difficult. And you have a really rich mid-range who are trying to do multiple different use case scenarios, and all of this creates some confusions at each of these tiers. But it's really important for you to find a product that aligns with your organization, your risk tolerance, your capacity to be successful with a platform versus a product along the way. So the way that we recommend you to get that right shortlist is not to look at a single one-size-fits-all snapshot of the marketplace, but instead really ask yourself, what are you trying to do? And the way we do that is we try to get our clients to self-identify with a number of canonical use case scenarios. So within each of these 5 broad categories I have here: brand management, marketing asset management, enterprise asset management, publishing, and video and audio management, we have some sub scenarios that are uniquely different in some really important ways. And I think if you align yourself with a number of these scenarios, and usually it's 2 or 3 or at most a handful of these scenarios, and then you begin to say which scenarios are most important to us as an organization, do some prioritization. This will allow you to figure out which vendors are most suited to your unique needs. And so the way we do that with our clients is, we go through an exercise where we ask you to set, or we help you self-identify here, and then we ask you to do some weightings, and based on those weightings, then we recommend a quadrant view of which vendors are potentially the right fit, because we're aligning what you're trying to do with what these vendors were fundamentally built to solve, and that's really important. If anyone wants to see a demo of that, we call it our Real Quadrant shortlist builder. You can actually go on our website and try it out yourself, or if you're interested in having Scott give you a demo, he'll be happy to do that as well. Once we have our stories, once we have our shortlist, now it's time to do some hands-on testing. And the first way we do that is in the ideation phase, when we do realistic vendor demos where the vendors show you how their solutions meet your needs. If any of you have ever sat in vendor demos, they can be at times quite boring. I've sat in hundreds of these in my life, and I assure you I've seen them all. But the ones that are the most interesting are the ones that are real, like we mentioned. And so the trick to this is to not let vendors come in and give you the same canned demonstration that they give everyone else. The one that looks slick and perfect and shows you their latest features that they just added, last week, last month, last quarter. But instead, you want to make these demos from the vendors speak to those scenarios that you wrote, so that the people witnessing the scenarios on your selection teams can actually see themselves working within the system. They can actually see how it's going to impact their lives, and that's where it's really important. So no canned demos. Make sure your team is represented at every demo. Nothing kills a demo more than if someone attends 2 of the 3 demos in a demo week. You want to make sure everyone attends each one and gives everyone a fair shot. And then you want to really make sure that you lay out these demo days. So again, so that the vendors are not just coming in and doing the same demo they give at conferences or give to the client that they pitched yesterday, but instead you want them to demonstrate the scenarios that you wrote in a prescribed order, so that your team can compare apples to apples to apples. And that makes a huge difference as you're trying to make sense of a very complicated issue here. And then during the demo, this is when you start to ask really some of the hard questions, and particularly around pricing, because it's at this phase that the negotiation starts to begin, where because when it comes to pricing, it's all about how well do they understand you and how well do you understand them, and the closer you can get to that, the better your price will be. Once you get through the demo week, then we recommend that you go to a proof of concept stage, and sometimes we call this a bake-off or a competitive proof of concept. But really what we're doing here is putting your 2 finalists head to head. And what I want you to do is, again, make this as real as possible. So use your real scenarios, use your real content, use your real people in real environments, and try to mimic a real project as much as you can. And sometimes we get pushback on this because it can be a real time intensive, a real resource intensive, a real cost intensive step in this process. But I can honestly say some of the most successful projects that we've ever seen, some of the most successful selections we've ever seen, are the ones that took the time to do a competitive bake-off. If you don't have time to do a competitive bake-off, at least do a proof of concept with your leader in the clubhouse. Make them go through a mini project as much as you can, and you'll learn a lot going through that. And it's definitely a good use of your time. So I hope you've seen, as we go through this process, what we're suggesting here is an approach that where you're sketching some light requirements at the beginning, and as you go through this, you can refine at every step. So for example, coming out of the demo week, there's likely to be some open questions, even around the vendors that move into the proof of concept phase. But the proof of concept phase is designed to help you answer some of those open questions, right? And if you have uncertainty about how is this DAM going to integrate with our incumbent web content management system, or our incumbent marketing automation system, or our incumbent PIM system, that's the time to test it, right? Don't find out when it's too late after you've already signed the contract that doing those types of integrations are going to be difficult, really answer those open questions at the end of this winnowing down process, and then move into an implementation. So what we're trying to do here in this design thinking methodology is really testing at every stage, testing your scenario fit, testing your technology fit, testing your fit as a partner with the people, because it's not just about technology, and then ultimately, is this a good value fit? The Nielsen Norman Group does a lot of work around design thinking when it comes to user experience design. And they talk about design thinking developing 3 significant components of common ground in teams: shared vocabulary, tangible artifacts, and a trust-based team culture. And what we found is when you apply design thinking to the product selection, that's exactly what you get too. You have a shared vocabulary in these use case scenarios, so that everyone is marching in the same direction. They're not just concerned by their 1 or 2 requirements. They're actually invested in the holistic final state. You get tangible artifacts in that proof of concept. You actually have a pilot that can be used as your phase 1 of your rollout, and you have a trust-based team culture because everyone had input. Everyone saw themselves in this process, and they really understood how it all is going to benefit the organization as a whole, as opposed to guessing how it might impact the future state. And that goes a long way to really getting buy-in. And so if you compare this kind of a traditional end-to-end process, traditionally there was a ton of time spent on requirements up front, some time on the RFP proposals and demos, and then once a selection was made, you went into a specs phase and a big bang implementation. I think a more modern, sensible way to do this is to spend a little bit less time on requirements, look for the differentiating requirements up front, spend more time on the RFP proposals and demos, and especially that bake-off POC, which should transition really nicely into a live pilot, which really works well for how modern technology should be implemented today, and that's in really a phased rollout as opposed to that big bang implementation in most cases. Jacob Nielsen says, wonderful technology solving the wrong problem will fail. We kind of adapted that to say, wonderful technology solving the wrong problem will fail. There's a lot of good technology out there, but it's not one size fits all technology. This technology is fundamentally built to solve certain use cases, and you as an organization are trying to solve certain use cases. The key here is to find the technology that best fits what it is you're trying to do. And if you go through a methodology that tests your vendor partners at every step of the way, I think your chances of being successful are going to be much, much greater in the long run. Some final thoughts here. If anyone's interested in digital asset management research or any of the research across our MarTech purview, feel free to go on the website, realstorygroup.com, and just download a sample. You'll get a true flavor of how we don't pull any punches in our evaluation, and we try to help buyers really go into a technology selection with their eyes open. You can try out that shortlist builder that I mentioned and get a flavor for that. If anyone is interested in the book I talked about, The Right Way to Select Technology, you can go to Rosenfeld Media or Amazon or wherever and find that. And if you have any questions about anything I discussed, feel free to contact me. My information's here and on the website, or reach out to Scott or Tony, or we'd be happy to hear from any of you on your experiences or how we can help you in the future as well. But the marketplace in DAM right now is vibrant. There's a ton of selections going on, and I just want you to find the right solution for what it is you're trying to do. And with that said, I will say again, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and I look forward to continuing this conversation in the future. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.